Retro Gaming Radio.
I'm Shane Armandale, your host.
Comprehensive online
Welcome to Retro Gaming Radio.
Welcome to Retro Gaming Radio. Comprehensive
I'm Shane Armandale, your host. Welcome to the program.
Hello, folks. Welcome to the March 2002 edition of Retro Gaming Radio. I'm Shane Armandale, your host. Welcome to the program. This month's show is going to be a full hour, folks. We don't have time to amble along, so let's get right into the meat of the show. First, I'd like to read and respond to the letter of the month sent in this month by Matt Barton. Hi, guys. Thanks for the latest show. I can't help but feel my faith in humanity being restored piece by piece, episode by episode. If only you had been in charge of Commodore. I couldn't agree more with your last thoughts on remakes. I also caught myself yelling amen during the last show when you ranted about the pathetic engine whoring that's been going on in the action market. One genre I'd like to hear ranted about just a bit on the next show are RPGs. Now take classic RPGs like Bard's Tale, Pool of Radiance, and Wizardry 1. These games had an element that I haven't seen in any of the new games, where graphics, animation, and fully digitized musical scores take the place of adventure. The last RPG I suffered through, Pool of Radiance 2, was so bad I swore I'd never buy another RPG until I'd seen it thoroughly reviewed and played the demos. I played all the Gold Box games, Pools of Radiance, Curse of the Azure Bonds, Secret of the Silver Blades, on my C64, and they were all great. The graphics were terrible, the sound was awful, and the animation was choppy, but damn, I'd literally stay up all night long playing them. The new RPGs, though, I found myself playing them for an hour to 30 minutes, then getting tired and shutting them down. These games include the Might and Magic series, Arcanum, Icewind Dale, and so on. The only thing I hate about Baldur's Gate is you can only create one character. Other popular RPGs, Diablo, etc., also have this limitation. That's no fun. Who wants to play D&D by himself? Hell, half the fun is creating personalities for your party as you work your way through the game. What I'd like to see is you discuss on the show is Pool of Radiance 1 and its horrid modern sequel, Pool of Radiance 2, Ruins of Myth Draenor. I guess my biggest problem with the new RPGs is the gameplay does too much for you. All the characters speak, etc. When I played Pool of Radiance 1 on my 64, I always dreamed about how much better the game would be when the graphics, sound, and animation were upgraded. After I'd played Prince of Persia, but I'm just jumping right ahead of myself. When I played Pools of Radiance 2 for a while, I realized these things are the most superficial aspects of the game. I think I've lost something over the years. P.S. I also appreciated your discussion on online gaming and the lifers and cheaters. How true. Matt Barton. Well, Matt, I'm going to give you a little secret that doesn't just apply to RPGs, but applies to video gaming in general. And if you've listened to some of my older shows, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. The old days, the Gold Box games, Questron, the original Ultima series, and old games in general, but let's just kind of stick to RPGs. Old games in general, you had a limited pool of resources to work with. You know, you only had so much memory for graphics. You couldn't just slap a sticker on the box that says, no, you need 32 megs of video, not 16. You need 256 megs of RAM, not 64. There was no choice back in the old days to say, let's make them use something better so that we can upgrade the game to what we feel that they need to have. The real difference between old games and new games, if you really take and look at everything, if you say, well, evolution says that video games have to look better for people to continue to buy them. They have to continue to evolve with the hardware and the software industry as it evolves. I don't necessarily think that's true completely. I understand that people basically justify the cost of that $140 video card by getting the latest and greatest game that utilizes it. However, if you look back to classic games like Jumpman, Pac-Man, pretty much anything that, was basically crappy sound and graphics, but incredibly addictive gameplay. Like you said, playing games until, for all hours of the night. I remember going through entire weekends playing the same crappy, by today's standards, 8-bit games all weekend long. Load Runner, Forbidden Forest. We'd sleep in shifts, for God's sakes. You build levels while I sleep, and then I'll play your levels and build you levels while you sleep. There's something that is missing from today's society and yesterday's society. And it's easy to blame the game developers, but they're only giving the people what they want. Now, I've come to a conclusion on this one. What makes the baby boomer generation, us, separate from what I call the gimme generation, which is what's going on now? The difference between the generations is imagination. Today's gamers don't have to imagine anything anymore. It's all handed to them. The challenge in playing video games now is to have the best video card and sound card possible, otherwise your game's going to run like crap. In the old days, we had to imagine the lush forest. We had to utilize that primitive yet working stereo sound at our advantage to kind of imagine what it'd be like if these things were creeping up on us. We didn't have 5-to-1 surround, sound blaster, digital, live, everything. There's no need to imagine anymore in today's games. Everything is handed to you. In the old days, when you were playing Pool of Radiance, yeah, the crappy graphics and the crappy sound, you had to immerse yourself. How many people in the old days read books for hobbies? Quite a few. Myself and a lot of the friends that I knew were all book readers. You know, there wasn't anything else to do, really, but read books and watch television. You know, the baby boomer generation watched TV. Today's generation plays video games, and that's pretty much what they do. In the old days, us book readers would have no trouble immersing ourselves into an RPG world where all they had to do was supply the storyline and a little interaction, and we could take off with the rest. Today's generation doesn't understand how to do that. They have to have it all spelled out for them. You know, we are living in the AOL generation, folks. AOL people can't navigate a dial-up connection. They're not going to play a video game where not everything is handed to them. So game companies go on to develop what they think the people want. A 100% lightly interactive movie that they feel that the gimme generation will approve of and continue to buy. It used to be that the gameplay sold the game. You'd go to your friend's house, and the games that they would have, you would play, you would say, this is a lot of fun, and you'd go buy it. However, today's generation is about screenshots. Once again, the box screenshots and the television commercials showing the FMV cutscenes a la Final Fantasy X. Notice how you didn't see any game graphics in the Final Fantasy X commercials, just the full motion video cutscenes. This sort of game making is popular, it's vogue, and that's what the people want. So if you're looking for imagination, Matt, you may have to stay in the C64 and the 8-bit world, because that's about the only place you're going to find imagination necessary anymore. And if you haven't played it yet, I recommend Legacy of the Ancients for the C64. I've done a review for it. It's quite frankly the best RPG I've ever played on any system to date. And there's no need to send me flame mail about how cool Final Fantasy is, folks, because I don't care. Final Fantasy to me has never been everything it's cracked up to be. The fact that they're at number 10 alone speaks miles. So thank you for your letter, Matt. I hope that that I've done the Shane R. Monroe spin on your question. But we've got to move on. Imagination versus glorification, that's what my notes say. So we're done with that. Let's move on to the rant, which I've actually gotten a little bit out of already. But we're going to talk a little bit about something that another person had wrote in about, and it makes a lot of sense. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, yeah, you know, there's always been a line drawn that you could never quantify or dignify by saying this is when games were good and this is when games turned to crap. And, you know, you can say it was the invention of 3D, because once 3D gaming came around, we've had nothing but FPSs and RTSs. But you know what? I think that this guy really nailed the nail on the head. When you were young, those of us who are still young, or not young, I should say, those of us in our 30-somethings, when you went to the arcade to play games, because that's what you did, right? Because the arcade still had better games than you could get at home. When you went to the arcade to play games, what was your end result? What were you striving for when you played old arcade games? In some cases, it was levels, like Pac-Man. You wanted to get to the key, the ninth key, whatever. But for the most part, what were you shooting for? What was your drive? You wanted your initials on the high score table, right? Why? Because entering initials was a bragging right. It was a symbol of mastery. It was something that said, I am better than you are. You know? It was something that you could go every day and check and see if somebody's knocked your score down. And if they did, you'd be plunking quarters in there until you hopefully gain that extra few hundred points to get your score back at the top. You know? That and coming up with the nastiest three-letter expressions you can come up with, like ass. There's only so much you can do with 3 letters, folks. And by the way, if you had ever wondered if the 3 letters was intentional, that's why. Because there's only so many nasty things you can write in 3 letters. Now, there were a couple of games that let you enter like 7 letters. Heck, Tron went even further and only let you enter 2. I guess your first and last initial, so much for your middle one, because they, probably being a Disney game, they didn't even want the chance of ass being entered in there. I can't confirm that. If anybody who worked on the Tron video game for Disney knows the actual answer to that one, I'd love to have you write in and let me know. But anyway, back to high scores. You know, video games started kind of slanting down when there was a lack of a merit system. Something that was quantifiable, that you could go up to your friend and say, I made it to this level. I scored this score, right? Because there was something that was quantifiable about that. If you went to your friend and said, I scored 300,000 on Robotron yesterday, that was a value that you could compare, stand not next to another person who played Robotron on the same machine with the same settings, and you could say, yes, I beat you. Yes, I am better than you. There was a merit system involved in classic video games that is gone now. Okay? Let me tell you what they consider the merit system today, and I'll tell you why it's worthless. Frags. Frags are today's merit system. Now, what does a frag mean? Nothing. It means that you, in an environment that is uncheckable, easy to scrutinize, you were able to kill somebody else or shoot somebody else down. It doesn't matter that you play Quake 3 24 hours a day and this guy plays once a week for an hour and you blew him into oblivion. Well, that's a real valuable frag. Yeah, that's something you can put on a certificate, hang on your wall and say, I kicked the crap out of some 40-year-old guy that plays like 1/100th of the time that I do. There's nothing quantitative about that. You can go to work tomorrow and say, yeah, I fragged 20 people yesterday. There's no merit to that. There's no weight value to that. It means nothing, honestly. Why? Because you could be playing bots. You could be playing the best of the best or the worst of the worst. There is nothing closed system about online modern fragfest games. It really means nothing. There are no bragging rights behind it. You know, the only way you can brag to somebody, the only way that you can show a merit is to take the person that you're trying to prove yourself against in on your game and shoot them. But even then, where's the bragging rights to that? Where are the things to strive for? You know? I don't want to say all modern games have fallen victim to the lack of the merit system, because there have been a couple of very good examples of it, such as Rogue Squadron, right, from LucasArts. Not the one that's on the GameCube. I have no idea how that works. I don't even care. I'm talking about the PC version of Rogue Squadron. When you play Rogue Squadron, you get medals, right? You get like a silver, bronze, or gold, depending on how well you did. That's something that's quantitative. You can go to your friend and say, I was playing level 1 of Rogue Squadron, I got a gold medal. That means you did something good. And that's something that that guy can then go home and try to reproduce, right? And the nice thing about it is you actually get rewarded for your merit system. If you get so many gold medals in Rogue Squadron, it opens up new levels for you. I mean, that is great. That is what makes gameplay repetitive and addictive, is a merit system, a value of checks and balances that you can compete, not with just some guy over the phone line who probably never plays the game, or someone on the other end of the phone line that's all they do. There's no challenge in that. I guarantee I could walk into any game of Quake and I would get my butt completely obliterated. To what end? What purpose? That guy can now brag that he blew some schmuck 32-year-old guy away playing Quake 3 last night online. Nothing. You know? There's no bragging rights. There's no merit system. And I think that as we started seeing games leave the merit system, leave entering your initials for a high score, leave that trackable, quantifiable system of scoring, of value, of prowess. That's when games started to suck. Where's the value? Where's the bragging rights in Command and Conquer knockoffs? Right? Where's the value of that? Okay, you beat Nod, then you went and played the other side, you beat that side, then what? I mean, that's it. You finished the game. Okay, hundreds of people have finished the game. Where do you pin a value to that? How can you say, I did this good? I mean, yeah, there's a score, but scores are like thrown in as a secondary thing now, right? I mean, there's some sort of thing that tracks some sort of progress. But in all reality, I finished the game. And while we're at it, what the hell is with modern games and their crappy endings anyway? I mean, damn, if I'm going to play a game like Diablo 2 for a month straight, trying to finish this game, man, I want some sort of a decent ending, Look at Golden Axe. Look at Golden Axe at the arcade. You finish that, and at least there was something. I mean, you got to see the credits. You got to see the little guys jumping out of the arcade machine and running off. That was cool. I mean, it wasn't a great ending, but it was a good ending, There are so few games with very good endings anymore. I mean, Diablo 2, I expected something really cool when I beat Diablo at the end of Diablo 2. Congratulations, you win. Click mouse to continue. What the hell? If you want to see a good ending to a game, you play Legacy of the Ancients. If you do not feel like every second you poured into that game was worth it by the end of Legacy of the Ancients, I would be totally stunned. That's the example of a good ending. There really isn't an ending. I mean, what was the ending to Return to Castle Wolfenstein? That wasn't any good. Come on. Back to the basics, Reward, merit, bragging rights, quantitative scoring. That's what made games fun and replayable. At least for us guys who are in the classic gaming field, that's what we find fun. To me, there is nothing more exciting than being able to fight for a score in Robotron. All my friends around here, that's what we play. We play Robotron. Who's got the best score, and we continually fight for that score. That's the difference, folks. That's the difference between one of the differences anyway. Let's start with that. This is a quantifiable statement that you can say, and say games started to kind of suck when we lost a merit system. I played the crap out of Rogue Squadron, folks. I'm not afraid to admit that. I played Rogue Squadron until I was blue in the face. I went back and played missions over and over again trying to score that silver or gold medal. That's what people need to start thinking about, FPS can only last so long before people are going to get sick of it, folks. I mean, it's been a long time. I can't believe it lasted this long. There's nothing new. We make you buy a new video card, we make you have more RAM, and we add some color and lighting to the fog, and now you've got Quake whatever. So, that's my rant for this month's edition of Retro Gaming Radio. The loss of the high score system. Okay, let's move on, since I've just blown away like a third of the show. I want to look at an 8-bit flashback.
It's time for an 8-bit flashback.
Today's 8-bit flashback is coming courtesy of one of our regular listeners, Richie. He pointed out that in a previous episode, I kind of attributed Return to Castle Wolfenstein's origin as Wolf 3D, which isn't exactly true, because we all know, those of us who've been around the block a few times, know that there was a Wolfenstein before Wolf 3D came around. That's right, it was called Castle Wolfenstein, or Castle Wolfenstein. And it was an 8-bit title. It came out on the Atari, the Apple, and the C64. And again, I've seen the Apple version and the 64 version, and I haven't seen the Atari version. I'm not going to comment on that, but I can tell you the C64 version just stomps all over the Apple version. And that's saying a lot, because this game is not even technologically advanced for the time that it came out. I provided a couple of links for you to look at some screenshots and to kind of read up on the game. Basically, this was an overhead 2D explorer kind of game, which is always so funny, because they show like the room sort of Berserk or Frenzy style. And instead of seeing like your head like into the eagle's nest, which I always thought was really clever, you see the full side of your body, but you're looking top down into the room. I love that bit. Anyway, you basically wander through the castle trying to get out. And there are guards everywhere. There's some stupid guards, there's some smart guards, and there's some hope you never encounter them guards. You got all sorts of goodies. You've got a gun, you've got a knife, you've got grenades, right? And basically, it's move room to room, whack the guards, search the chest, get the goodies, and try to get your ass out alive. Now, I said earlier that the game wasn't exactly technologically advanced. And it wasn't, The game really shows its origins as an Apple II game, because the page flipping is so bad at times. But there were some very unique things about Castle Wolfenstein that made it cool. Some things that had never been seen in video games before. And I think it was one of the very first games that was more related to stealth than anything else. Now, these are the missions that, like in Return to Castle Wolfenstein, people just can't stand. The one where you have to run around undetected and whack everybody and get the hell out of the level before somebody sees you and sounds the alarm. Well, Castle Wolfenstein was one of the first games that basically, if you could get away with it, if possible, sometimes not shooting the guards, sometimes sneaking around and not being detected was the best thing. What really made the game cool, and this is also part of its counterpart, too, and sometimes I kind of get the two of them mixed up because I played Castle Wolfenstein and its sequel, Beyond Castle Wolfenstein, so much that I start running the two together. But in one of these versions, you could actually drag the enemy off and hide him somewhere, because while the guards, I believe the first one, only stayed in their own room, in the second one, the guards moved from room to room, and if they came across the body, guess what? The alarm was sounded, and you would be basically captured at the drop of a hat. Now, what was really cool in Beyond Castle Wolfenstein was you actually had a pass system where you could find passes on guards, you could find passes inside of boxes, and you could use these passes to get past certain types of guards, right? And it was so cool because this was one of the first games that had speech, folks, and it was almost all in German, which was even funnier. I don't know why that seems funny to me, but, the first game that, one of the first games that has speech, you can't understand it. But they made their point well. You'd run into this room and this guard would be like, "Halt! Kommandi!" And you'd go over there, and if you tried to run, he'd shoot you in the back or he'd sound the alarm. And then he'd be like, "Dospass," and you got this sort of a closed captioning going on at the bottom that's trying to help you relay what it is he wants. And then if you give him the wrong pass, you flash him, say, pass 1, and he wanted pass 5, he'll pull his gun out and ask you again for your pass. And then if you did the wrong one the second time around, you better hope that you could kill him quick because he's going to go sound the alarm. But what I thought was kind of funny about the game is you could actually bribe the guards if you had enough cash. Instead of flashing them a pass, you flash them bucks. A dollar sign would appear in your chest where the pass would be. And most guards were bribable. You had to be ready to kill the guy if you couldn't buy him off. But, that was something that was really unique. It wasn't so much a puzzle-solving thing, but it added an element to gameplay that hadn't really been explored yet. And a lot of people say, why do you down Return to Castle Wolfenstein so much? And the reason I down it is because it's nothing at all like Castle Wolfenstein or Beyond Castle Wolfenstein. None of the elements that really took Castle Wolfenstein out of just being like every other game and made it into something unique, even though the graphics sucked. I mean, even for a C64, the graphics sucked. But, what took this game out of the mold of every other game, none of that made it to Return to Castle Wolfenstein. Even if they had implemented the pass system somehow, where you could flash them a pass or bribe them, to me, that would have at least tied something together with Castle Wolfenstein and its modern age brother, And I played Return to Castle Wolfenstein till the end, and, and as a Quake engine game goes, it was fun. I liked a lot of the Raiders of the Lost Ark freaky spirit things going on. That was really cool. But was it worthy of the Wolfenstein name? It's really hard to say, because there's nothing about Return to Castle Wolfenstein that's anything at all like Castle Wolfenstein, aside from a Nazi Germany theme, and that's that's really pushing it. More like a Nazi Germany skin for Quake, and that's pretty much what Return to Castle Wolfenstein ended up being. But anyway, the 8-bit flashback again is Castle Wolfenstein, and there was a follow-up beyond Castle Wolfenstein, which had a lot more options, and I thought was immeasurably more fun because of the pass system. You can get the C64 image just about anywhere. You could also play it on the Atari, I believe it's the Atari 800 emulator, or you could play it, of course, on the Apple II emulator, your choice. I would definitely recommend the C64 version. It was a lot of fun. If you really want to see what a game that changes the rules is like, because even games that I rave about, like Legacy of the Ancients and Ultimate Wizard and stuff like that, they all owe themselves to another game. They owe themselves to Jumpman, or they owe themselves to other titles. But, Castle Wolfenstein stuck out on its own, and it made its own place in history. And those are the kind of games that I can actually look at and say, this was a game that changed the way that games were made from that point on. So it's worth a ruse. It's from Muse Software, Castle Wolfenstein, for your 8-bit computer, 8-bit emulator. Okay, folks, let's move along. After the 8-bit flashback, we're going to talk about a hardware review this time around. This is very exciting stuff, folks. You're going to love this. We're going to review the X-Arcade arcade controller. And you're probably saying, man, another arcade controller. What's up with that? Well, arcade controllers come and go. There have been a couple that have stood the test of time, like the Hot Rod, which has pretty much become the ipso de facto in arcade controllers. And then, of course, we had the Stick-It controller, which, as you know, has always been my favorite controller. And lots of you have written me and said, Shane, I can't get a Stick-It anymore. I've written to them. The site's still up. They won't write me back. How do I get a Stick-It? It sounds so cool. The honest truth is, folks, the Stick-It I think it's gone. I don't know why the web page is still up there. I did do the web page for them, and it's still there. But Danny, the guy that ran Stick-It, he had some problems with investors, more so than other people I know. And he continually got screwed over, folks. And while he had the best intentions in mind and he really wanted to see the Stick-It progress and everybody to get one, the bottom of the truth is, you got no dinero, you got no company. So with that in mind, folks, you don't have to write me about the Stick-It anymore. It's gone. I haven't talked to Danny recently, but the last time I talked to him, he was talking about selling out, and he was basically, basically to the point to where he just didn't want to deal with it anymore. So what are the alternatives? Well, we know about the Hot Rod, and the Hot Rod is actually a pretty nice piece of hardware. What most of you know, the Hot Rod is very nicely built. It's very sturdy. It's very aesthetically attractive. And its only downfall, the Hot Rod, is the fact that it's locked into certain keys that you have to be able to make your game play with those keys, or you don't get to play at all. There's no way to change that button 1 is mapped to A or button 2 is mapped to S, etc. There's no option to change that in the Hot Rod. And that's what made the Stick-It such a cool toy when it came out, was on-the-fly programmability. Let's face it, the early Stick-Its were kind of not aesthetically pleasing. They were kind of squared off. They didn't have nice little T-molding and all that other good stuff. But it was durably built. It was quality built. And even though it didn't look great, it performed very, very well. And the on-the-fly programming was very useful in trying to easily and quickly get your games that you wanted to play with it up and running quickly. Because you could change the keystrokes, if you wanted to play Destination Galaga, God knows why you'd want to, but if you wanted to play that and the keys were mappable to arrow keys and spacebar, then you could map the Stick-It controller very quickly to match those keys. You wouldn't have to go into the game and try to reprogram it to match those keys. You could make the Stick-It do what you wanted to do. And that was a good thing. That's what made the Stick-It so popular, and that's something that the Hot Rod I don't think could ever touch. Then you've got defunct controllers like the Custom Arcade, who I shall not get into great detail of, but most of you know my opinion about that. The Custom Arcade controller never really had a chance. because, you basically had to throw a cable between the controller and the computer. You had to run some DOS shell program to program it, blah, blah, blah. So that and the fact that, while the interchangeable panels was a nice idea, there was only one interchangeable panel that was ready, and there were supposed to be flight yokes and all that other stuff. But I can tell you, being personally involved, I doubt you'll ever see a custom arcade controller see the light of day. Ever. And if it does, I would not necessarily recommend buying one. Now, let's move on to the X-Arcade, our hardware review for this episode. The X-Arcade is what I would call the hot rod meets the stick-it. And these guys came out not too long ago. It's only been a couple of months since they've really been shipping product. And I saw one non-working at CGE last year. And your first instinct is, hey, this looks like a hot rod. I mean, it's got a cooler, a much more cool look to it, but it basically looks like a hot rod. And it's got more buttons, and hey, what's this little switch thing on the back? So it was kind of intriguing at the time. So we've been waiting to see if, when they shipped and what the price point was going to be and all that good stuff, and if they could meet some of the things that they promised. Let's take a quick overview of the X-Arcade controller. First of all, like I said, it does look a lot like a hot rod. It's a little bit smaller, which is good because it fits good in my desk, and someday I'll have a screenshot up where you can see how that works. It does work as a keyboard pass-through, so you plug this into your keyboard slot, your plug, and then you plug your keyboard into the hot rod. So it's just like any of the other controllers where it's basically keyboard emulation, so there's no need to install drivers, which is a good thing. It promises multi-connectivity, which means that you can use this guy on your PC, you can use it on your Xbox, you can use it on your GameCube, you can use it on your Dreamcast. Now, I do not have any of the extra connectors, folks, so I cannot promise you how that works. I can tell you that basically it's an interface cable that goes from the X-Arcade to a plug, and then that plug plugs into another stretch of cable that acts as the conversion box. Now, the one that plugs into the PC is just another length of cable, so there's really no box or extra controller chips or anything to make it work with the PC. So it's kind of a native PC box. But they do promise that there's a Dreamcast and some other future console support, and I will try to get a hold of some of those and review them for future episodes. There's 9 buttons per player, plus a 1 and 2 player start button, which is cool. So you got lots of buttons, a little bit more actually than the hot rod. And of course you've got 2 8-way controllers with 4 micro switches each. And it works fairly well. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the problems that it shipped with. But overall, I mean, very solid design. And it has 4 slots for programming, and we're going to get into more of that in a minute. One of them's fixed, which they call Mode 1, which is MAME only, which is basically a default MAME configuration that you can't change, and then 3 slots for your own programming. When the box arrived, first of all, it came FedEx, which I really appreciated that, and the box was well packed. I opened up the box, and I'll tell you what, folks, these guys have done their homework. The box that it comes in is not just a cardboard box with shipping material inside like the stick it came with. I'm not sure what the hot rod shows up with, but I don't remember it showing up in a box that looked like this. The box was very clean, had a nice transparent window on the front so you could see the arcade controller. The box was very top quality. It looks like they put a lot of time and effort into making sure this guy was marketable, which I really appreciated that. It was a very good first impression, and they deserve kudos for that because the first impression, is something you never have a second shot at. So I unpacked the sucker, pulled it out of the thing, and the first thing I noticed, it was fairly light. It seemed lighter than the hot rod, but it still had plenty of room on the surface for your hands and your arms to kind of lay there while you're playing it. And I like the fact that it was lighter weight. You may think, that means it's not quite as built as sturdy. Not necessarily true. The construction was very sturdy. I haven't had any problem with it feeling cheap or anything. It was just lighter. That was just something that popped right into my head. all of the controls and the micro switches are all top-notch quality stuff. These are the kind of thing that you'd go to Haps Controls and buy. If you went to an arcade, these would be the same buttons and joysticks that you would be using. Like I said, it was nice because it slid right onto my desk, and it pretty much took the place of the stick-it, and I still had some desk room left, which is something that I really appreciated, something I would have never bought a hot rod, and certainly the custom arcade would never have even come close to fitting on my desk. So I got it unpacked, and I looked at the configuration. It looked pretty simple to do. So I plugged in all the cables, plugged it in, fired it up. No problems on startup. Everything was good. It just replaced my keyboard, so I didn't expect any sort of issues. Fired it up, and you'll notice there's a little red light that lights up on the top right corner, just like the stick-it, which got me kind of excited because I thought maybe they're using the same sort of encoder as the stick-it used. And that being the case, I was definitely going to be in hog heaven. So I went ahead and I started looking through the documentation, and the documentation is better than most, but it's not great. I mean, it's good, but it's not superb documentation. Some of the wording could have been done better, and there are some things missing in the documentation that I felt were purposefully left out, like not being able to program the arrow keys right, and I'm going to get to that. But they do have an addendum on their site, which I haven't really gotten to look at very closely yet, which probably talk about it. But right out of the box, that was something I noticed. So I went and hooked it up, and the first thing I did was go in and play Robotron. Robotron is the ipso de facto testo for checking out arcade controllers. You can do Smash TV, you can do Black Widow, but trust me, Robotron is what you really want to work the controller with. So it was already in MAME mode, so I just went ahead, fired it up, changed MAME32 into Hot Rod mode, so all the keys were mapped right, started it up, and bang, I was in playing Robotron. Quick, easy, I didn't even have to read the instructions. I did notice right off the cuff, though, that it was very hard to go diagonally. One direction on the moving on the left-hand controller and firing in one direction on the right-hand controller. So that means I was going to have to open the box. Now, I'm no stranger to arcade controls. I know they get off-center. I know they get shifted. And sometimes you got to just go in and tweak it. Now, is this something that I would recommend for the AOL generation? No. No. If you are a standard average consumer, and the fact of unscrewing and having to dink with something inside, that may kind of turn your stomach a little bit. That's one of the few cons to this controller, is reading some of the other reviews about the controller. Pretty much everybody upon arrival of getting these controllers have to open it up and adjust something inside because something is shifted or something doesn't meet their particular needs. So that's something to think about. If you're squeamish about having to open something up, that could be a real con to this controller. But I opened it up and I adjusted the leaf switches inside, and from that point on, I was good to go. There were no more problems with it responding quickly to my commands and my movements, so that was a good thing. That turned out to be an okay deal. They did make it very easy to get into, which is probably a good thing. 6 screws on the bottom that the screws double with holding on the little rubber feet. So you take those 6 off, use yourself a little wedge or something to pry open the bottom. I don't say pry because it's so well seated in there. You just got to kind of, flick it out there with like a knife or something. You flick the bottom out and you have complete access to all the controls, all the buttons. Everything is right there, easy to get to. You're not having to move a bunch of cables out of the way. You're not having to remove an encoder to get to it or anything. Everything's right there and easy to get to. Fantastic. That was a brilliant piece of work. If you're going to make me get inside it, make my experience on the inside as good as my experience is on the outside. They've managed to do that. So I went ahead and started running it through the paces. I played Zookeeper and some of my other favorite games, and everything worked responsively as it should. So then I started getting into the programmability part of it. And the first thing I wanted to do was to see what the programmability system was like. Is it like my favorite, the Stick-It? Well, it's a little bit different, but it's close, which is good. Basically, there's a little slider switch, which is it's kind of hard to kind of feel. I almost would have rather had two toggle switches or something. But this works okay. It's a slider switch. And you slide it to another mode, and then at the back there's a programming button. You tap that twice, and that loads in your saved configuration in that mode. If you switched it back to mode 1, which is main configuration, you still tap the button twice, which would allow the controller to return to the main state. So that's the sequence. You slide the slider to the mode you want, you double push the programming button, you're in that mode. Now, how do you program it? Programming isn't that bad. It's not as easy as the stick it, but it's close enough. You push the programming button once, hold the button or direction that you want to program, press the key and hold the key on the keyboard you want to code to, and then as soon as the light starts blinking, you let go. You push the button again, and you're locked in. You now have the programming button. You push the programming button, and then your system's locked in with that button assigned to that key. You can do more than one with each load sequence. So you push the load button, assign all the keys, push the load button again, you're locked in. Now this will hold those preferences even if you unplug the controller and take off with it, take it to your friend's house. So that's really a nice little feature, being able to store those and keep those in there. Now, here is the only down part this is really the only really bad thing I had to say about the X-Arcade controller. Programming the arrow keys should be something that is completely fundamental to any controller. Every game that I know of defaults to arrow keys to use. So basically, with the X-Arcade, you are telling yourself, I'm going to have to go into every game, even if I have a nice arrow arrangement, basically, you want to be able to make a mode on the X-Arcade where you could say this is a standard arrow button configuration. This moves the arrows, this is left control, this is left alt, this is right alt, this is right shift. Basically a standard game configuration, because most games are using arrow keys, most games are using space bar. You want a standard loadout, but you can't do that with the X-Arcade. Now, I wrote to X-Arcade and said, hey, I can't program the arrow keys. Their solution was, you have to have the num lock off when you program it and off when you use it. I followed their instructions, and I could not get that feature to work. And I wrote them back and said, hey, it's not working for me. Do you have any suggestions? And I haven't heard back from them yet, but I'm sure I will. So that is the one downfall. That's the one that I have to tell you is probably the biggest slam that I can offer you. Because this is a quality device. Otherwise, folks, is the arrow key programmability, and I'm sure that there is a workaround, but I didn't get into it. Since we're speaking of the bad things, let's tag on some of the cons to this controller, and these are pretty lightweight, folks. This is a recommended product. Okay, my stick-it's in the shed, and I have my X-Arcade sitting on my desk. That should be enough, for those of you who know me, that's enough to prove that I'm in favor of the product if I use it myself. The fact that it arrived kind of uncalibrated, so to speak. In other words, it arrived with leaf switches moved that I had to go in myself and tweak it because I couldn't shoot diagonally. All right, that's something that the average consumer is not going to want to do. He's not going to feel comfortable doing. That's something that they may need to work on. And I'm not exactly sure what the solution is to that. I mean, controls move in shipping. I don't know what they can do about it. Suffice to say, though, that's something you should think about. Even though the documentation hinted that there was some way to program multiple keystrokes, because one of the headers in the documentation said programming single keystrokes, but then they never tell you how to program multiple keystrokes. So that's something that the stick-it could do very well, is handle 3 or 4 key commands in sequence. Think fatalities for Mortal Kombat, and you'll get the idea. The X-Arcade does not appear to be able to handle that. Now, somebody at X-Arcade knows how to do this, and I am just denser than dirt. By all means, let me know, and I will post a correction and tell people how to do it on one of the later shows. And then the last thing, of course, that I have to mention is the price. It ships for $199. Which, considering that like the Microsoft wheel and stuff costs like $150, that's not so hard to stomach anymore. But for us classic gamers that used to buy joysticks for like $14 for our C64, $2 is kind of a bit to part with, So, is it a quality? Is it worth the $200? If you're going to use it, yes. If it is a novelty to you to have this cool arcade controller and you're not going to use it, $2 might be a little outside. Maybe you better stick with the gamepad, or maybe look at the AKIKO Joy that I reviewed in the last episode of Retro Gaming Radio as an alternative to freaky PC controls if you want something a little more old school. Let me summarize by saying that the X-Arcade is a very well-built piece of equipment. It was built in conjunction with the Hot Rod people. So, you can tell that the Hot Rod had its influence on it. It's very durable. It works very well, aside from the little calibration you have to do at the beginning. It's completely programmable. The programming steps are a little bit more intense than the Stick It was. But the fact that you can do it is enough. They've listened to the people. They fixed the problem with the Hot Rod, which was no programmability. So you've got that. Plus, you've got 3 slots to program. So that's a great thing. I can't think of me using more than maybe 1 or 2 extra configurations. The arrow key thing, though, is probably my biggest concern, and I'm sure there's a workaround, something that I missed. I'd like to have a standard arrow key configuration for the X-Arcade because I have a lot of games that are set for arrow key and left control, and I'd like to be able to do that too. But overall, the X-Arcade, there's a link to the X-Arcade right there on the page. Please go visit them. Check it out. The website looks good, but sometimes it's hard to find what you're looking for. Maybe the X-Arcade team could take a peek at the site and maybe kind of think about maybe how they could rearrange things to make the information a little bit easier to get by the people, because I had trouble finding what I was looking for, which was the arrow key solution. And my guess is it probably appears in the addendum manual, so they didn't put it right in the main row to the site there. So, but go visit the site, check it out. If you're in the market and you've been thinking about the Hot Rod and you've been dying to get a Stick It but can't get one, here is your solution. The X-Arcade, from the good folks at X-Arcade, who sent one over for me to review. Thank you, folks. I hope you find this information useful, and hopefully, those of you who've been holding out for a Stick It that have been saying, no, I want programmability, you'll be able to find what you want in the X-Arcade controller. Okay, folks, let's move on to a quick software review. My time is fastly running short. I want to review a neat product I found called the AKIKO emulator. Now, I talked an episode or 2 ago about the Project 32 emulator, which emulates the Amiga CD32 game console. Now, a lot of you going, what the hell was an Amiga CD32? Let's just say that it was basically Commodore's answer to the Sega CD. Now, we all know that the Genesis and the Sega CD, with its brilliant 64 colors and many of its other limitations, was not exactly the best CD-ROM console out there. And the 3DO, well, had the right people working on it, just didn't quite come into its own fruition. The CD32 was actually probably the best console of its day. Unfortunately, Commodore was being managed into the ground, and the CD32, while the sales were picking up and it was actually growing in popularity, by the time anybody knew about it, Commodore was dead and gone. So, the CD32 is basically a CD-based Amiga 1200 computer, which means you got all the cool graphics and all the cool video stuff of the Amiga, but you also had the CD-ROM to help give you better, more quality titles. Now, the AKIKO emulates the CD32 via the WinUAE emulator. Now, I know what you're thinking. WinUAE doesn't do a very good job of playing CD32 games, those of you who've been out and about. The AKIKO actually has custom-written patches to make specific games work, much like the Project 32 emulator that we talked about a couple episodes ago. The AKIKO does it very well. The nice thing about the AKIKO is it also works as a CD-TV emulator. Now, if you haven't heard of the CD32, folks, I don't expect you to even know what a CD-TV is. CD-TV was Commodore's first shot at a set-top entertainment box. Basically what Microsoft's trying to do now with the Xbox. A one-unit that looks like a CD player, a home set-top box CD player, that would play video games, get you online, take care of your TV needs. Basically, CD-TV was supposed to be, sort of like what the Nuon is now, if you know what a Nuon is. Interactive infrared remote control, the whole bit. And it played a lot of Amiga games, and again, Commodore couldn't market their way out of a paper bag, so it went away. The price tag on the CD-TV was like almost $600, so, the price point wasn't there either, so it wasn't all Commodore's piss-poor marketing in this case. But anyway, the AKIKO is designed to play certain CD32 titles, most of them from the look of the list, and a lot of CD TV titles. So what does this feature over and above, say, WinUAE? Well, like I said, it uses custom patches, which means it has a much better chance of getting the game that it's said to play. It also features excellent CDXL playback, which is the forerunner to full motion video. That was Commodore's version of full motion video, was CDXL. And I'll tell you what, there weren't a lot of games with CDXL, but the ones that had CDXL, they did a good job. I mean, there's like a 15-minute movie at the beginning of Alien Breed Tower Assault, which I'd love to be able to rip to MPEG or something, just so I could have it easily accessible to me. It's very cool. There's a lot of games, more than any other system of its kind, and the games are definitely designed to work. One of the nice thing is you can actually change the input keys. On a lot of emulators, you're pretty much locked into the keys that they tell you to. But AKIKO will let you program the joystick or keyboard, change the configuration. It's very, very nice. That's one of the big selling points of the thing, I think. Also, here's something that I thought was a very nice touch, and he didn't have to do this, but he did. If you get the actual CD32 or CD-TV ROM images, you can actually look at the CD32 and the CD-TV boot screens. You can use the CD-ROM music player that was built into both machines. And they're really cool. I mean, I haven't seen a more cool CD player, because the Sega CD would play on the Dreamcast. Everybody has a music player for their console now. But you know what? The CD32 and the CD-TV music player just had total style. And you can see some of the screenshots, too, if you go and look at the AKIKO page. They're also planning on emulating the MPEG full motion video module. Now, let me just give you a quick bit of history on this, folks, because the FMV module for the CD32 is one of those mysterious beasts that you're never really sure existed or not. There were about 13,000 of them made, which makes them a collector item. I actually had one at one time, but sold it when I was in a tight financial crunch. I wish I hadn't. Those things are basically gold. I mean, they're worth their weight in gold now because you can't get these suckers anywhere anymore. Basically, what these did was give you the ability to play back full screen MPEG. Now, you got to understand, folks, this is like 1982 here. They didn't even have like the real MPEG playback for PCs yet. PCs were still making beeps and had CGA color. This actually let them get on par with the Philips CDI, which at the time was the home entertainment box that would let you watch movies. An interesting bit of trivia here. The Philips CDI used a proprietary video CD method, which basically made CDI movies, not video CDs, which is what you can get now, but proprietary movies that they claimed would only work on the CDI. Even if you bought a video CD player, you couldn't play Philips movies on them. Commodore at the last minute, and they do have their moments of brilliance, actually went in and figured out how to decode or unlock a Philips CDI movie, and it was playable on the CD32 with a full motion video card. Now, needless to say, Philips was very pleased about this, but they had their own problems. The CDI wasn't selling worth a damn anyway. So they were pissed at Commodore, but what could they do? Commodore was on their way out anyway. This full motion video module plugged into the CD32, and some games, there was actually one game that used it, which is Cannon Fodder. And if you go to my CD32 site, you can actually download the MPEG of it that I've stripped from the CD. And Jurassic Park, a future game for the CD32 that was never released, was to use it. Now, there was a demo disc of Commodore's that had 3 or 4 full motion video pieces encoded on it that you could only use the FMV module to decode. In the future, and they've already got it partially working, they're going to emulate this FMV, which probably doesn't mean anything to most of you, but those of you who have always dreamed about an FMV module for your CD32 or thought you may never see it in action, you're going to get to with the AKIKO. Now, it plays games very well. The games that it plays very good. He even has a generic boot that you can boot something that may not be supported, given his best possible guesses on settings. Everybody knows Amiga emulation is not an easy task. Now there are some bad parts to the AKIKO, and I've got a note into him. And if he responds, I'll get you an update on the next show. There's some XP compatibility problems, and it may extend to 2K too, because I don't have Windows 2K anywhere where I can test it. But a lot of the games, when you get into the games, the buttons stop working. The control works, you can move left, right, up, and down, but the fire buttons stop working. And I've had this same exact problem with WinUAE myself. So it's not an AKIKO problem, it's a WinUAE problem. But since WinUAE is the basis of the project, if you've got XP, expect some problems. The input programming on it is very laborious. If you want to make joystick up be the space bar, you've got to iterate through every key and redefine it. And then you actually have to use a pull down. You can't just say, push space and have it assigned to that. I can tell he didn't put a lot of time into that. It's nice to have it as an option, and you'll probably only set it once. It'd be nice if it was a little bit easier. One of the other downfalls is it's not free, folks. It's a shareware package. If you download it, you'll be limited to like 5 different games. One of them is the very awesome game Little Devil, which is a beautiful display of what a CD32 title should be. But on the good note is it's only $15. I went ahead and parted with the cash because I'm a CD32 freak. Those of you out there who've wanted a CD32 have tons of games waiting for you to get a CD32. $15 is nothing. The last drawback is $15 doesn't deliver you a package that works. Here's the problem. The package requires Kickstart ROMs, basically ROM images from an original CD32 or an Amiga 1200 or a CD-TV or an Amiga 500. Now, how does this work? If you've got an Amiga sitting around, if you have a CD32 sitting around, there are ways of extracting the ROM image from memory, sticking it on a disk, and bringing it to your PC. Do I recommend this? No. I can also not recommend that you go out and search the web for ROM images, because that's piracy and you don't want to do that. The reason I say that is, even though the CD32 and the Amiga are technically dead systems, and you can feel justified to yourself by pirating it because it's no longer made, the good folks at Cloanto, they've been making a package called Amiga Forever, which is an Amiga emulation package also based on WinUAE. They have bought the rights to these ROMs. If you pirate them, you are taking food out of Cloanto's mouth. These are people that have been supporting the Amiga for a long, long time. They've been very good to the RetroGaming radio show. They're good people. Now, yes, you could probably find the ROM images online. Okay? Be good, be nice, play by the rules, help people out that have been working hard to keep supporting the Amiga. Go to the Cloanto site. I'll provide a link for you. Go to the Cloanto site and buy the Amiga Forever package so that you get the legal ROMs. Once you have the ROMs, they plug right into AKIKO, and you'll be able to use the CD32 titles. Okay? So, let me reiterate. When you pay $15, you get a licensed version of AKIKO, which has settings for all the games that you can play. You still need to acquire the Amiga ROMs. How you do it is up to you. I recommend that you go to Cloanto and buy the ROMs legally. If you do it any other way, you're basically violating, piracy. You're violating copyright laws, and you're not helping out Cloanto, and these guys have been really good. So, that's my quick review of AKIKO. I will follow up more when I find out what the deal is with the XP and Win2K issues. I need to wrap up the show, folks. We are almost out of time. I want to give some honorable mentions to some products and goodies. Very important. For those of you who don't know, those of you who are freaks like me that were really into Tron when you were growing up, if you do not know already, the Tron 20th Anniversary DVD is out. It's so much better than that crappy movie-only one they shoveled to us a few years ago. It's worth it. It's a 2-disc set. They've got new behind-the-scenes stuff. They've got deleted scenes that were only on the Laserdisc. Suffice to say, if you're a Tron fan, you have to have the Tron 20th Anniversary DVD. I'll provide a link to their homepage. A couple of you have asked me the new patch for the Dragon's Lair Ultimate CD-ROM that I reviewed a few episodes ago. Those patches do not fix most of the issues that I gave on the show. The only issue it offers is it lets it return to windowed mode when you go from full screen mode. They're still working on the other stuff. This patch does not fix all of the issues that I mentioned on the show. Also, one more thing, one of the listeners of the show, regular listener Paradox, offers up the fact that the AKIKO, the PlayStation controller emulator piece of hardware that lets you plug in a PS1 controller to your PC, seems to have problems with games that require very quick polling of the controls. He named Street Fighter 2 as a specific example. I verified his results. In Street Fighter 2, if you choose, say, Chun-Li, and you try to do her lightning kick by pressing a button to do her low kick over and over again for the lightning kick, the AKIKO does not seem to be able to keep up fast enough to make that move work. Now, I play Mortal Kombat. If I'm going to play fighting games, I play Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat works fine. But some of the games like Street Fighter 2, etc., Paradox warns that the AKIKO may not be your best product to make that happen. So, stand warned. I feel it is my journalistic integrity to let you know that that was an issue that was found out later. But folks, we're really running close to the end of the show. I want to plug the Classic Gaming Expo. It's going to be the second week in August in Las Vegas, Nevada, USA. We are going to be there. It's going to be a great time. If you haven't been to CGE, I'm going to have a link for you on the site. Go check it out. This is the E3 of classic gaming, folks. You do not want to miss it. It's worth the trip. Sign up in advance. Get your hotel rooms in advance. It'll be a lot cheaper for you that way. And we're really looking forward to it. Me and Brian, the producer, we're going to be there. It's going to be exciting. It was fun last year. It's going to be even better this year. So go check out the Classic Gaming Expo. Well, folks, I'm running out of time. I want to round the show off. One last thing. The Retro Gaming Radio Year 3 CD, double set CD collection is now available online. It's $14.95. You get a nice double jewel case, 2 CDs with all of the episodes in both their original format, which would be streaming video, and MP3 format, plus a whole bunch of goodies. Double disc set, $14.95. You can get it from the site. Thanks for checking it out. A lot of people have already ordered it. I know they're just going to be tickled to death with it. Okay, folks, that'll wrap up the March 2002 edition of Retro Gaming Radio. Until next month, this is Shane R. Monroe saying, keep it retro.